Is bigger always better? Are lighter bikes actually the answer? You know, what's the actual difference between a light and a mid-weight adventure bike? A question that seems to have an obvious answer, but an answer that is filled with nuance. So, let's put that to the test. In one corner, we have one of the best small adventure bikes, a CF Moto 450MT. I rode both a stock version and this yellow one, unit kindly loaned to me by ATH Moto. With 41 horsepower and 175 kilos, this is one of the most capable light ADVs on the market. Now, light is a relative term, but it's especially true in comparison to our second subject, my CF Moto 800MTX. This more than doubles the power output while also adding another 25 kilos on the scale. Same manufacturer, but two completely opposite approaches to the off-road world. Some aspects will refer to these particular models, but really, most of them can be applied to their entire categories. I took both bikes on a 3-day enduro tour organized by my friend at Enduro Nuts here in Transylvania. This is usually a tour done on light dirt bikes, so it should be a proper test for our slightly overweight competitors. Now, full disclosure, this video was sponsored by Insta360 and their Ace Pro 2, but more on that later. We didn't need to go far in order to feel the most obvious difference between the two machines: their engines. Let's get this out of the way. The 450MT has enough power for 99% of riders and situations. In fact, its power delivery is excellent, linear from the bottom, an engine that loves to chug down low but isn't bothered when pushed high in the revs. The MTX more than doubles that power, which many times is absolutely useless off-road. But for someone more experienced, it can help. First, power sliding the rear end is easier, as you can do it in any gear, even at lower RPMs. But where more power can really play in your favor is when lifting the front wheel over an obstacle. The quick practical wheelie a more experienced rider might do to safely cross over obstacles. It's not that the 450MT can't do it, it just can't do it as easily. Sometimes you might need to use the clutch in order to achieve the same effect, while on the MTX you just blip the throttle. And you can do it at lower rev ranges too. This can make for a safer ride, but I will say one thing: you need to have some sort of skills in order to benefit from it. Otherwise, for a beginner, this might actually turn into a downside. If there was one place where midweights have a real advantage, those have to be the high-speed sections. Those few extra kilos can make for a very stable ride. With proper technique, cornering on them can also be really fun. Here, I felt better on the MTX, and that might also be because of its integrated steering damper. Many midweight ADVs come with this feature, while I can't think of any lightweight adventure to rock one. The MTX gave me more confidence, I was able to trust it more. Now, that stability isn't just a result of weight gains. These bigger bikes also come with bigger price tags, and that allows manufacturers to spend more on their suspension setups. Don't get me wrong, the 450 has good suspension out of the box, and so does the MTX. But this is not necessarily normal. You see, typically, the smaller bikes used to be cheaper and thus come with what I would call sloppy setups. It's almost like manufacturers didn't care to engineer forks that were made for someone weighing over 40 kilos. This is one place where, with maybe a couple exceptions, big bikes do have an edge. As we rode deeper into the mountains, the terrain became rougher. And that's where the MTX showed another advantage: its ground clearance. There are many examples of midweight adventure bikes that hover well off the ground, which makes you scrape less on logs and rocks. It makes it so you don't get hung up when passing over obstacles. Now, the 450, for how amazing it is off the road, lacks a bit in this department. For some it might not matter, but if you are going into rougher places, smashing the undercarriage of your motorcycle is less than ideal, even with protection. But here is the tricky thing: nothing comes for free. You see, the taller a bike sits off the ground, the taller its rider will have to be in order to reach the dirt comfortably. That's the balancing act. Sure, you can learn skills to combat it, but at the beginning, there's a high chance you'll get scared and sick of the sport before getting to master those skills. Riding off-road is supposed to be fun, but picking up a bike 50 times a day is not my idea of Saturday entertainment. Look, if you want to make good Saturday entertainment, you should look no further than today's video sponsor, Insta360 and their Ace Pro 2. With a large sensor capable of shooting up to 8K or 4K with HDR in a professional log format,
This camera has made me want to use action shots more often in my videos.
Because now, they finally look professional.
Even when the light goes out, the pure video mode is there to capture your adventure, no matter the conditions. Its long battery life and quick release mount make using the camera a pleasure, and sharing the important moments for their app has never been easier.
For us, motorcycle enthusiasts, the camera comes with a really wide field of view,
allowing you to choose from a more dynamic setting all the way to pure realism with their perspective picker. The new detachable wind guard allows for capturing unadulterated engine sounds, cutting down on the wind and providing clear, natural sounding audio.
This has been a great addition to our toolkit. A workhorse I can always rely on. One that integrates beautifully in a vast ecosystem.
Check it out at the link below, down in the description, and thanks again to Insta360 for sponsoring this video.
Now, back to our adventure bikes.
So far, it seems like the more expensive, bigger, fancier midweight adventure bikes are better. Well, about that. Look, we tend to judge adventure bikes on whether they're good off-road or not. A binary view. And I think that's a bit too broad. Off-road can mean many things, from crawling around rock gardens to riding at 60 miles an hour on a fast gravel road. My point is, these two scenarios are and feel very different. It's hard to build a bike that's good at both. Even in the dirt bike world, there isn't one that can master everything. And it's the same with adventure bikes. What makes one machine good in the slow stuff can really cripple it on high-speed sections. And here's where the MTX and 450MT start going their own ways.
We can talk about weight on a scale all day, but that's only part of the story. Yes, the MTX is a hefty machine, but because of its fuel pods, it can feel lighter than other midweight competitors. That's the thing, if we look on paper, the 450MT shouldn't be that much lighter.
I mean, what's 25 kilos? 10% of the weight of the MTX? Not a great amount of difference. The thing with light adventure bikes is that they're not just lighter, but smaller as well. In practice, the difference feels much more substantial. Given its size, the 450 is easier to grab, easier to handle, more agile. Overall, I would call it more approachable. That's the biggest difference here. It's not the kilos on the scale, but the overall size of the motorcycle. Think about it. You lose a front end, go to dab with your foot, the bike being a few kilos lighter won't save you. Actually reaching that ground will.
If I learned one thing from trying out multiple adventure machines, is that weight on its own never tells the entire story.
Sometimes, power and technique can't really mask the kilograms. Picking your bike up feels significantly easier on the 450MT, so does turning around on a dead-end trail. You feel this lack of weight when doing elephant turns, it's just easier to handle at low speeds. No matter the skill level, that's something you actually notice. Another place where the MTX will feel more sluggish is when going down on faster roads. You approach a hairpin turn, stand on the brakes and go to turn the motorcycle around. There is no hiding. You will feel the weight. Because power can't mask the kilos, so the 450MT really comes into its element. As the tour went on, darkness fell upon us. That's where the Ace Pro 2 came in handy, as I managed to capture the trails and how they were becoming increasingly more difficult. And the more technical the tracks, the more I saw myself gravitating towards the 450MT. The slower and riskier the situations, the more I wanted to grab the lighter bike.
Sure, its suspension setup wasn't quite as good. Its ground clearance was much lower. But its size made it an obvious pick. Even for myself, whenever I had the option, I would go for the lighter machine.
Because on those technical trails, the size advantage is universal. It helps you, it helps me, it helps anybody. You might argue that electronic aids found in these midweight adventures can compensate for their added bulkiness. On one hand, you would be right. The MTX and many of its kind do come with some pretty useful ones. From cruise control, quick shifters, off-road traction control, all the way to tire pressure sensors. Especially on these big bikes, they can be really useful, but far from necessary. I want to be clear, none of these features will make you better off-road. Skill is something you learn and no electronic aid can fully help with that. And none can replace the experience you have as a rider. That's why you'll see, the better the rider, the more electronic nannies they will want to turn off. It's like training wheels on a bicycle. Sure, at first they can seem to help, as they get you riding quicker. But if you don't take them off quickly enough, they can inhibit you from learning proper techniques. And sometimes, if set up incorrectly, things like traction control or ABS can literally make your life harder. That's just how I see it.
You've probably heard this phrase before. The less experience you have, the lighter a bike you should get. And I think that statement is very wrong, but for a different reason.
Instead of experience, I would call it skill set. People think that riding 10,000 kilometers a year on their big touring bikes makes them experienced.
And it does, but that doesn't mean shit off-road.
Someone with 1,000 kilometers of proper off-roading will be a better rider on the gravel. It's something people may not like hearing, but long days in the saddle doing nothing won't make you a better rider when the pavement runs out.
So let's rephrase that saying. The lesser your off-road skills are, the lighter a bike you should get.
A beginner on a heavy bike will constantly be scared, frozen, letting the motorcycle ride him. That's not good for learning and not safe either. Look, I've been there. My first dirt bike was a KTM 300 two-stroke. Horrible beginner bike. It took me way longer to learn proper skills than it should have. Because I was scared of it. It's the same with bigger bikes. Their power and weight can be intimidating. With that, the higher your skill set, the better you can use a midweight adventure bike. That is true. A good rider will go many more places on a big bike than a beginner on a light adventure. But don't understand me wrong. That doesn't make the midweight monsters better off-road bikes. Because if you were to take that same skilled rider and put him on a smaller, more capable machine, like this 450MT, he would reach places that MTX simply couldn't. Less weight and size is an advantage for everyone, regardless of skills.
With all that being said, there is one place where I would pick the 800 any day of the week. Let me switch to my Ace Pro 2 and show you what I'm talking about.
It's the street. Here, the MTX is just better. It's got more overtaking power. It cruises on the highway at lower RPMs. It's more comfortable, it's more stable because of the weight.
Ultimately, on the road, 40 horsepower is enough, but 80 and up is simply better. That's even before mentioning riding with pillions.
On the other hand, there is one aspect I haven't heard many people talk about. Safety.
In general, the lighter the motorcycle, the safer it is to crash. When that behemoth lands on top of you, 30 kilograms can really make a difference. Also, the lighter the bike, the more gradual the feeling of losing front-end grip becomes. That's why a dirt bike will be easier to save from a low side. These heavy ADVs tend to have a ton of front-end grip, but that same grip can disappear very quickly. And the heavier the bike, the quicker that transition gets. Adding to it, these midweights can be dangerous to ride for novices. Look, on my MTX, you don't have to pull the throttle much in order to reach outrageous speeds on dirt tracks. And the bike will feel stable at those speeds, masking the sensation really well.
Seconds later, you find yourself traveling at 100 kilometers an hour on a dirt road. And anyone can do this, regardless of their experience. And that's a problem.
Because while everyone can get up to that speed, not many can brake or turn at that point. Slowing down a heavy machine on a loose surface is a bit of an art, an acquired skill. It's much harder to do than speeding up. And cornering at those speeds? That's arguably even trickier. I've seen so many occasions of beginners going too quickly, only to run out of talent and have a massive crash afterwards. Now look, a 450MT can also reach ridiculous speeds off-road, but it will do that slower. It gives you more time to realize what you're doing. It makes you work for it, and I think that can be safer for many people.
Ultimately, after 3 days of riding these beasts, swapping back and forward, a clear image has formed in my mind.
The more you ride off-road, the more challenging the terrain, the more I leaned towards the lighter, smaller 450MT. Despite its weaker suspension and ground clearance, it didn't matter. If I were riding solo in difficult situations, there's no question which bike I'd pick. And yes, that's not the motorcycle I chose to purchase. I got a midweight because I want to have a really good, fun street bike at the same time. And I will add something.
I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, not Chris Burt or Paul Tarres. But I do have a background in enduro and hard enduro. For someone like me and all of you guys that come from dirt bikes, taming a midweight adventure motorcycle is easier.
There are some skills that we developed on small two-strokes that really apply well to adventure bikes. That makes taming 200 kilogram beasts safer, easier. Ultimately, the better your off-road skill set, the more you can compromise on size and weight in order to get a better street experience. But if all you have is that street experience, I would argue you're making your life unnecessarily tough by picking a big motorcycle. Look, learning to ride off-road is way more difficult than on-road. Simple as that. Having hundreds of thousands of kilometers under your belt means absolutely nothing here. And ultimately, a bike like the 450MT will make your life and learning curve a lot easier and less frustrating. Both the 450 and the MTX have their purpose. Both can be ridden by the same riders. But depending on the rider, the user experience on bigger bikes can vary wildly. That's how I see it.
Thanks to Insta360 and their Ace Pro 2 for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check one out at the link in the description down below. Also, thanks to Ati Hashimoto for loaning me this 450MT for the video and allowing me to take it on the 3-day trip with Enduro Nuts around the Carpathian Mountains. Have a good one.